Okay there, Penn State fans. It's Minnesota week. It's a pretty big week for Penn State. 9-1 Penn State. 2 regular season games left. 1 road trip left. A potentially tricky game, I think, for Penn State. I'm Bob Flounders, joined as always on Mondays when permissible. Johnny McGonigal is with me. We just heard from James Franklin. Um, Interesting game. He had a lot to say about some things. We're curious about some things. We're going to talk about Johnny's AP ballot and how it kind of played out for him. Check it out on PennLive, Penn State fans, and take a good look at it. And then also keep in mind that, and Johnny is nodding his head, he knows what I'm going to say. Keep in mind that it could have looked different, and it would have been very interesting to see about maybe the response to how it could have looked. We'll get to that, Johnny. You had an eventful weekend. I know you had some early travel on Sunday, but you didn't have to sweat out the birds, so you could probably get a little bit of rest on Sunday. But I know that you're feeling better probably than you did yesterday. It's good to see you. Hope you're doing well, and we could start with wherever you want to start with. I have a funny feeling it's going to involve Abdul Carter, but how are you?
I'm good, Bob. I'm good. Yeah, you mentioned the travel issue. Basically went to check into my flight in the press box on Saturday at Ross-Ade Stadium and got a notice that's saying that my booking didn't exist. Apparently, the airline had canceled the flight like well before, didn't get any notice. So we had to rush and get a flight back for me. Otherwise, I'd be recording this podcast from a hotel in Indianapolis somewhere. But made it back to Philly. You're back in Harrisburg. We're all good there, and we're in our homes. Good thing for James Franklin's press conference, tuning in there and listening to what he had to say after Penn State's 49-10 win at Purdue and ahead of their game at Minnesota this weekend. Like you mentioned, Bob, the last road game on the schedule before they close out at home against Maryland. James touched on quite a bit. The thing that stood out to me most was him talking about Abdul Carter. And Abdul, who has 17 and a half tackles for loss now through 10 games, that ranks second in the country. And he has 8 sacks, and he could have a hell of a lot more because Abdul's getting held like crazy this season. And, Saturday was a big example of that. He ended up getting a holding call at Purdue, which he celebrated a little bit because I think it's been a long season for him in terms of just getting wrapped up like crazy. And I went back and I looked, Bob, because I was curious. Through 10 games, Abdul Carter has drawn only 2 holding calls. 2. That's crazy. That's wild. Yeah. I don't understand it. It could be like if you're just watching the film and you're watching the games like we are every week, I mean, that number should be double digits. We know that holding gets called on every play, that old football adage and everything. But I guess it's more of a credit to Abdul that he's putting up the numbers that he's putting up. He's playing the way he's playing. He's looking like a top 5 NFL draft pick, despite getting, armbarred and dragged and like just wrapped up and hugged seemingly every other play.
Yeah. And just to clarify, holding could get called on every play. I don't want to speak for you, but that's your point. Is the way they talk about it? You could call holding. You could call holding on every play. It doesn't get called on every play, but it literally could. And you're right. It started, Johnny. It started in the West Virginia game when you said that. When you just said that, I remember. There was a big deal made about he was offsides a lot. Well, he was early in the season. He's not now. He's much better at it. But he was also, you watched the West Virginia game, like there were some games where they blocked him. There were some games there were some plays where they blocked him. There were some plays they had to chip on him, but there were also some plays where it sure looked like there were some pro wrestling moves going on out there by some offensive tackles. And it's continued, right? It's not just West Virginia. The Ohio State game, he had a nice game. He probably could have had a nicer game, but it's not unique just to Abdul, but your point really brings it to light because he's only been called twice. I mean, there's holding on a lot of plays, but he should have gotten more flags than he's gotten. I think James for James to talk about it, he did after the Purdue game. I had some quotes from James. I actually had a quote from Abdul. He said he does not get frustrated. He just keeps playing snap to snap, and he thinks eventually it's going to pay off, but he's been very patient. Deni Dennis Sutton told me he gets held every play. Not Deni. Abdul, literally, that's the only way they can stop him is to hold him on every play. Now, that might be a bit of a stretch, but he's probably not that far off. And your point is also valid, Johnny. His season at 17 and a half tackles for loss and growing, it's not going to – they get Maryland late in the year. I mean, if he's in that game, there's going to be some trouble for Maryland. And now that Deni Dennis Sutton is healthy, they got to choose, man. Like, what are you going to do? Like, if you really, really focus on Abdul, Deni's going to get singled up, and that doesn't end well. He's got a lot of quarterback hurries and quarterback hits. It's a nice problem for Penn State to have, but I really the fact that you were able to get that number, only 2 holding calls. I mean, those guys, the officials need to wake up a little bit.
Yeah, and the holding call at Purdue that happened, like I mentioned, like he got held. And then it was 2 plays later that he actually got the flag. So he got held like crazy. He turned and looked at the back judge and kind of threw his hands up like what am I supposed to do here? He would have sacked Hudson Card, Purdue's quarterback, on that play if he was not held. Turned the back judge, says, basically, what do I got to do to get a flag here? Right. And then 2 plays later, ultimately gets the flag. So maybe he just needs to complain more. I mean, if I were him, I would be. But James Franklin was asked about, Abdul and if he gets frustrated and everything. And James said that if he was, getting frustrated and affected his play on the field, that would be a concern, but it's not. And James, talked a lot about and quote unquote said, Abdul's phenomenal motor has been showing up on film. Yeah. What he does to a defense is showing up on film. And that's not just the holding calls, missed or otherwise, the TFLs, the sacks, but how offenses are keeping a tight end in, keeping a running back in, affecting how they play offense, which, limits offenses, but also, opens up opportunities for other defensive linemen and linebackers and even DBs like Jalen Reed for Penn State's defense to make plays as well. Joe Hermit, got a good picture this past weekend of Drew Rosenhaus, super NFL agent, sitting with Abdul Carter's family. And I think, judging from the replies to Joe's tweet from the photo, fans saw Rosenhaus, I think, at the West Virginia game as well. So, Abdul is getting ready for the NFL. I mean, his focus is still on Penn State and what they have in front of them. But the NFL better start getting ready for Abdul Carter, and he's going to make a team really happy in April when they take him with a top 10 pick.
It's the blue-white breakdown. It's Minnesota week, and Johnny and I are not trying to hijack this James Franklin press conference and turn it into an Abdul Carter podcast, specifically Penn State fans. But I think talking about him and the year that he's had, it's really, really warranted. Johnny, I'm going to tell you right now, assuming Abdul Carter leaves for the NFL, a crazy assumption, right, with Drew Rosenhaus at Ross-Ade Stadium. Assuming that happens, and assuming he goes to the combine and he chooses to run, that is appointment viewing. You could say, well, it's not the Olympics, but I want to see how fast he runs, because the combination of his just flat out athleticism and speed and his first step, like his reaction time, right? It's unbelievable. It really is. And there's been a lot of really good Penn State defensive players, a lot of them. And they're playing in the NFL. They have a rich tradition of guys who can get around the corner in a hurry, in a bad mood. He is at the top. I don't know. I can't say he's the guy. He's right at the top of the list. It's a subjective list. He's been incredible, Johnny. I'm just going to say, what I think about this season through 10 games, there's a lot of players I can look back and say, man, these guys have been really special. They've come a long way. Obviously, Tyler Warren is right there. Drew Aller's development. There's so many things we could talk about with regards to positives in Penn State. But 2 players and their play speed to me this year, I'm going to remember for a long time. One is Abdul, and the other is Jalen Reed. Those guys, the way that they move on the field, the reckless way that they play. I mean, these guys, and they do it. They don't take any plays off. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what they're feeding these guys because their energy level is just phenomenal. And I can say that because look, I've seen a lot of Penn State players. I've seen a lot of games. There haven't been many players moving at the rate of speed that those two players have been moving at. It's been a pleasure watching them fly off the ball. There's other players we could talk about. Nick Singleton's a fast guy, right? But those two have just been phenomenal. And obviously Tyler Warren is Tyler Warren. He's definitely worthy of the Heisman hype. But I just wanted to, I don't know what your thoughts are about Abdul, but just watching him play and the speed at which he plays. If you're watching the game on TV, you can kind of have a little bit of a perspective. But when you see it up close from our vantage point, it's astounding.
It is. And I mean, look, the fact that Abdul is playing as much as he is too, we looked at Penn State's defensive end room, coming into the season. Jamel Lyons gets dismissed from the team. Zariah Fisher dealing with a long-term injury, and so we knew that the pressure and the responsibility was going to fall more on the shoulders of Abdul Carter and deny Dennis Sutton. I will say credit to Amin Vanover and I think Smith Vilbert with how they've played so far this season. Amin specifically, I think, has played really well to allow a breather, and allow like maybe Abdul takes a series off or a few plays off here and there, so that he's ready for when the moments that matter most in games, that he's at his top peak conditioning and able to go. But Abdul's season, it just can't be talked about enough. Like, I don't think he's going to reach. We were talking about this in the press box. I don't think he's going to reach the what was it, 29 TFLs that Courtney Brown had.
Courtney Brown, man, I would have loved to cover that guy. I just can't imagine that 29. Holy mackerel!
I mean, he might get 12 against Maryland.
29 tackles for loss, yeah.
No, but the season he's putting together is great. And you mentioned, the offsides and stuff that he was dealing with earlier in the season. He even had one against Ohio State. But we knew when we talked about this, there were going to be growing pains with him moving from linebacker to D end, and the eagerness that he plays with. He has the speed, power, and size that you want from a top tier NFL edge rusher. The antsiness was there a little bit early and trying to just get that down. But, those issues have been cleaned up for the most part. And, I mean, when you have a guy of that talent, the Micah Parsons comparisons were out there before the season. And I don't want to say he is Micah Parsons, but at the same time, like, I understand them more, and I think they're more easily made now than maybe they were, back in August or July when he made that switch.
Yeah, and to think he came here as a linebacker, and I think he wanted to be a linebacker. I believe James, and I think even Abdul said he wanted to be a linebacker, and I think James wanted him at defensive end maybe earlier, and they were like, "Nah, I'm a linebacker." But the more he thought about it, I'm almost positive I heard it that way. And whatever the case, he's at his right position now. He's found his home, and he is growing into his new home very, very quickly. And now that Deny is healthy, and he said he thinks he'll be 100% against Minnesota. He said he was close against Purdue. He looked very good. He looked really good. I mean, it was Purdue, right? Like, let's not get too carried away. I shouldn't get too carried away because it was Purdue, but Purdue. We've seen that when Deny and Abdul are both healthy, against whoever they're playing, it's no fun playing against those guys. When they both do finally go to the NFL, I mean, I can't imagine Abdul not going fairly early in the first round. I don't know where Deny is going, but he won't last too long either. He's a special player at a special size. I'm excited to watch them both healthy for as long as Penn State's going to play. And I don't care who they're playing. And if they get in the playoff against a good offensive line, they are fully capable of wrecking a game or turning the game in Penn State's favor.
Yeah, another guy that we talk about, guys going to the NFL. You mentioned him, Tyler Warren. I mean, also apologies to all the listeners here. I've got the train coming by. There was no horn being. Oh, there it is. Sorry. Uh, yeah, it's loud. I don't know if you can hear it, Bob, but I can certainly hear it. But you mentioned Tyler Warren and the
Yeah.
NFL and uh, guys who are just poised to star at the next level and who are
Yeah.
starring for Penn State right now. James Franklin, I asked him after the game, at Purdue, if Tyler should be in the Heisman conversation. He said yes. Talking to teammates, Drew Aller, Nick Singleton, those guys endorsing him for
Yeah.
2024 Heisman. And Tyler's not in that conversation right now in terms of the sports books and everything else. Like, he's not listed there, but I mean, I think he deserves an invite with the way that he's been playing this year, the versatility that he brings to Penn State's offense, both in the running game and the passing game, blocking. We talked about it after the game. James was asked on Monday about Luke Reynolds, the talented young freshman tight end, and potentially getting more opportunities down the stretch in the passing
Yeah.
game. And James was like, "Well, like, we're not going to take Tyler Warren off the field, so I don't know if he's going to be getting more opportunities here. Like,
Yeah.
there's no reason to take Tyler off the field.
Yeah.
Use him while you have him." And Bob, I know we touched on it a little bit in our post game video, but I'm just curious now, a couple days out from this game, and seeing how the Heisman race is unfolding right now. Travis Hunter is the front runner, the wide receiver for Colorado. Ashton Genty, the running back from Boise, in there. Do you think Tyler deserves an invite to New York based on what he's done so far this year?
You know, I, this is how I'm going to answer that. But my eyes tell me that he does. Now, to be fair, most Saturdays we're locked in on Penn State. I think since both of us have Heisman votes, we really and we're talking about a Penn State player. I know you're going to do it. I'm going to do it. We need to watch some games. We need to look at some players. We need to look at some highlights, and we want to make sure when we say it, we really mean it. But my eyes do tell me that he does, and his contributions. What else can the guy do? Like, what else do you want him to do? And do it at a high level. Even the Ohio State game when he went without a catch in the first half, he found a way against the best defense that Penn State has seen and maybe will see this year to have an impact down the stretch. He got them in position to tie the game. Let's just leave it at that, John. And he made an incredible catch also where they covered him like glue. I thought it was going to be an interception. He still caught the ball. He's an incredible player. And I want to say, I'm going to throw it back to you, Johnny. I'm not so sure that Abdul Carter shouldn't be maybe in the top 10 conversation of maybe when you look at the Heisman and in terms of defensive players. You mentioned the Colorado superstar, and I agree. Every time I see him in games, he's phenomenal, and I take nothing away from him. But Abdul Carter and his impact and what he's done on every play, and maybe how many more plays he could have, he's another guy that I think he's not going to go to New York City, but when you look with your eyes at what he's doing, like he is, they kind of flesh out that Heisman voting thing at the end, right? And I wouldn't be mad if he finished in the top 10. I'll say that right now.
Well, here's the thing, especially this year.
Yeah,
I think there's not an obvious quarterback right now because the Heisman, and like you mentioned, we're both voters. So in terms of who's going to win and all that kind of stuff, like, we haven't came to our conclusion yet. I mean, the season's not over, but we're just spitballing here, talking about some of the candidates and talking about the award, which over the years has become more quarterback centric.
Yes.
This year, there's not an obvious quarterback. I mean, you have Jalen Milroe at Alabama, Dylan Gabriel at Oregon, even Curtis Rourke from Indiana. Especially if they beat Ohio State, maybe get some consideration. But there's not like a top tier, no doubter quarterback this year, which is why I think, combined with the versatility that you've seen from Travis Hunter, that's why he's the front runner right now. And you see a group of 5 running back, in Ashton Genty, who is unbelievable. Like, that guy is unbelievable. And right now he is, I think, the second betting favorite. So in a weird year where there's not an obvious quarterback, where you've got, guys like Hunter and Genty in the mix, like, why not a Tyler Warren? Why not an Abdul Carter? We talk about other, positions and it being a more of a melting pot Heisman this year in terms of positions. Why not? Why shouldn't they? And I'll say this, though, it's not on us to have any campaigns for Heisman or anything like that. I think Penn State has been pretty, forthright with
Yeah.
what they think about Tyler Warren in terms of the Mackey Award, which is given to the top tight end in the country. They now have a website up advertising Tyler Warren as the best tight end in college football. Could they have started a Heisman campaign after the USC game? I think maybe, but then then you maybe shoot yourself in the foot if Tyler Warren doesn't keep performing the way he was going to perform. So that's maybe a question for a different day. But
Yeah.
yeah, I think he's in the mix in terms of just the best player in college football. I think Tyler Warren is in the mix, and you can make an argument for Abdul Carter as well.
Johnny, tell me if I'm wrong. I wouldn't be surprised if there is some sort of website. I'm not saying what it'll say, but I think maybe Abdul Carter needs a little pub just for whatever award he's up for. I mean, but that's the issue, right? You give one brilliant player, and obviously Tyler Warren. I mean, I don't think there's ever been a tight end quite like him. The versatility, the athleticism, former quarterback. I don't think there's ever been a player quite like Tyler Warren. And if anyone deserves a campaign, it's him. But I think there's some other guys that I think in the coming weeks you're going to see some other guys. There's going to be some strong pushes out there for some other players who are also deserving. I think, Johnny, for Penn State. A couple things here to get to because we devoted a lot of time to a couple of players, Johnny. Hey, so our PennLive Penn State Tech subscribers, if any of you are watching or listening, continue with the comments, continue with the questions. I'll get to as many as I can. I really enjoy interacting with you guys. You have some great comments and questions. And Johnny, I just wanted to mention one more thing. We're talking about positions. We're talking about unique talents. We're talking about, Drew Aller had a great game. Pro Prabula had a touchdown run, 49 yards. He was moving as well against Purdue. I found it very interesting what James had to say because at the end of the game, I think there were a lot of Penn State fans I've run into since that game that were wondering why Ethan Grunkmeyer didn't get in the game for that last series, even though Prabula threw a touchdown pass right to. It couldn't have ended much better. Bo Prabula threw a touchdown pass to Reynolds, but they want to see what they have. They want to see what they have, right? The fans want to see. Danny O'Brien has talked very highly about Ethan Grunkmeyer, the true freshman who has yet to play. James Franklin has talked about him. They want to see him, right? And that was a game where you could have saw him. Maybe we'll see him. Who knows? At Maryland, you just never know what's going to happen. But I thought James was very thorough in his response to why Bo finished the game, but also he talked about the need to make sure Grunkmeyer gets kind of up to speed because there's a world in which Drew's been hurt already. The way that Bo plays lends himself to collisions. There's a world in which he could have to play, and I thought him going into detail about kind of how they've approached Grunkmeyer's practice season with a special plan on Sunday to give him live reps because they know it's really hard to get three quarterbacks ready to play, and that they know that the fans are probably wondering why we haven't seen him. I thought it was a pretty good answer. What they do, Johnny, is they give him like 24 or 25 live reps every Sunday. Bo doesn't get any. He gets the reps during the week with Drew. But it was a thorough answer, and it also kind of speaks to what they really think about Grunkmeyer.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I mean, I was up there in the press box with you and with everyone else wondering why we weren't seeing Ethan Grunkmeyer, the true freshman, in there at the end of the game because, obviously Drew was done for the day. We know what Bo can do. Like we've seen enough over the last 2 years to know what Bo Prabula can do for you at quarterback, but we hadn't seen, Ethan Grunkmeyer, and everyone was curious. It wasn't just fans; it was us. It was us too. And so James's response today, talking about, like you said, those live reps, those behind the scenes reps on Sunday that are super valuable for a quarterback. Because let's be real, Drew could easily come back next year. Bo could be back. He could not be back. But Ethan Grunkmeyer could be your quarterback in theory, could be your quarterback next year. But even looking to 2026 could be your starting quarterback. And so, which seems more likely that it would be looking further down the line. So if he's your quarterback of the future, as a fan and as a media member, you want to see what the kid has. But also, if you're James Franklin, why give anything away early, but also just keep it in-house and keep his development in-house and understand that and be comfortable with the reps that he's getting. as long as he's getting valuable, meaningful reps, whether that's in a game, in the fourth quarter of the final drive against Purdue, if you're just going out there and handing the ball off, like, is that
Yeah,
really going to
yeah,
be
yeah.
useful or meaningful? So yeah, I think it's an interesting conversation to have, but James's answer today, I think, illuminated a good bit on it.
And someone may or may not have written about James's answer. I'm not going to say it was one of us, but I have a pretty good feeling that one of us did, and it might have been me. Check it out on PennLive. Also, real quick, Johnny, before we wrap this up, because it's interesting, your AP ballot, how you shook out the top 5. I looked at it. It was very understandable the way you did it. I think a lot of people probably did it that way. I think it played out that way. But I do know that you were kind of talking a little bit, Johnny, a little talking about, there was a scenario in which maybe you gave it a long thought that maybe your top 5 could have been a little bit different.
Well, we'll have to cut this out if there was a long pause there.
Yeah.
We'll have to let Colin
That was
know.
that was like a portrait pose of you, though. That close up, I kind of liked it. I bet you did that for your high school yearbook photo. It looked really good.
Yeah. I did give it a long think. I was considering, so my top 5 was, I think, pretty standard: Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, Penn State, Indiana, and then I went Notre Dame 6. The way I shuffled out, or you figured out the SEC, I went Bama, Ole Miss, Georgia, Tennessee, and then BYU there at 11, ahead of SMU, which I still think SMU should be ahead of Miami. The fact that Miami was 4 spots ahead of SMU in the CFP rankings made no sense. We'll see how that shakes out on Tuesday night when the new CFP committee rankings come out. I considered moving Texas out of the 3 spot and behind Penn State and Indiana, and having a Big Ten top 4. A part of that was because I got a lot of angry SEC messages after a column I wrote last week. But truly, I haven't been totally impressed with the way Texas has been playing. That held up on Saturday when they scraped by Arkansas on the road, winning 20-10. Their defense played really well. Quinn Ewers did not play really well. If Oregon ended up blowing out Wisconsin on Saturday night, and it was like, okay, well, Oregon's rolling, Ohio State rolled, Penn State rolled, Indiana was off, just on the basis of hey, the Big Ten is the Big Ten right now, and let's knock Texas out. But Oregon struggled, and then I just kind of had an internal conversation. I'm like, look, it's November. It is tough to win some of these games, especially on the road. So I didn't want to knock Texas too much by doing that. Also, we know that the Texas, SEC thing is going to get figured out here pretty soon when they play Texas A&M Thanksgiving weekend for a spot in the SEC championship game. So I didn't want to preemptively, drop Texas, even though their resume right now isn't all that. It really isn't. Pretty consistent with what Indiana has done so far this year, except Indiana hasn't lost. We'll find out this weekend what Indiana really has when they play Ohio State in Columbus. That's a game I'm looking forward to watching before Penn State plays at 3:30 against Minnesota. So, that was my top 5, my top 10. But like I said, we'll see how this thing shakes out on Tuesday night when the CFP rankings come out and see how they configure everything.
Johnny McGonigal versus the SEC fandom. I know who I'm picking if something's going to go down. I'm going to roll with you, Johnny, but I would just say maybe if you're going to go travel below, past the south of the Mason-Dixon line, bring some friends, have eyes in the back of your head on a swivel. Just be careful. Maybe, I don't know, brass knuckles, whatever you need to do, man. But continued success and luck with your hot takes. I don't even think they're hot takes, but SEC fans are a little bit sensitive. Now I'm in trouble for saying that. So now I think it's me and you versus the SEC, but mostly you. I like your chances. Anyway, that's it for this Blue-White Breakdown podcast with Johnny. We're going to have a couple more podcasts. Max Ralph will be involved as well. It's Minnesota week. We didn't really talk that much about Minnesota, but we're going to get to them. We had some things to say, Johnny and I, about Abdul Carter, Tyler Warren, and Ethan Grunkmeyer.